Hello. Welcome back. Last week we talked about the saboteurs and we explored what the different saboteurs are and how they can interfere with our growth and progress. So this week, as promised, we are going to talk about the sage and the sage perspective, the sage powers. So again, this is part of the positive intelligence. That's where this information is coming from. Shirzad Shermain is the author and developer of the program. I am doing coaching with them, done their training program, and am training to be a coach for positive intelligence coach. So I am sharing this because it's beautiful and because it's helpful for a lot of different folks in various ways of their life. I mean, this has been amazing and beautiful for those with addictions, for those in recovery that are still stuck in those negative thinking patterns and the shame, the guilt. This has really helped to expand people's lives. And this is what he calls an operating system. And so the saboteurs being the operating system are the negative thinking. All of those saboteurs are our automatic response to life, and we are reactive, and we have these automatic thoughts of situations which oftentimes are based on past experience, past traumas, past situations that are not the current situations. And so it can interfere with our ability to connect with others in a healthy, loving way. It can interfere with our connection with ourselves in a healthy, loving way for ourselves, our self-esteem, our confidence. And especially when it concerns addictions and being in this place of struggling and trying to cope day to day, the saboteurs are just everywhere. They're in everyday life, all day, every day, unless we get into this sage perspective. And the sage perspective is this beautiful, beautiful place of like the wise old owl and the calm self, where I think all of us at some point, we want life to be easier, right? I feel like I could speak for every single person in the world that says, I just want life to be a little easier. And this is the way, because when we shift our thinking into appreciating the things that are there, appreciating even in a difficult struggle, we can find gifts in the most difficult struggles. It doesn't mean that we have this toxic positivity where we just ignore that we're in a struggle or we ignore that there's something going on, but we just choose to focus. Addiction, for example, having addictions in the past or even still struggling, these are lessons we're learning. They're lessons that we're learning so that we as humans can evolve and we can learn things so our soul can evolve. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to see the value of things that in society, in family, in our own mind is so negative and such a bad thing, right? When we can make a shift into, how is this a gift for me? This is a challenge that I'm overcoming, that I've overcome, or that I plan to overcome. And when we can shift into this thinking of what are the gifts, what is the beautiful parts of this experience, and balancing that and taking into consideration that there are gifts in everything if we choose to look for them, right? And the sage perspective is this place of looking for those gifts and sharing our heart space with others and especially with ourselves. And so the five superpowers of the sage perspective is the empathy power, the explore power, the innovate power, the navigate power, and the activate power. And so we're going to talk about those today and kind of just a really quick introduction and some examples, and just, putting the context of this information, this program is a 6-week program that is the first initial introduction to this concept and the program that Shirzad created. And so while I'm condensing it down into a very short period of time here in this this live stream, it's definitely something that expands, right? Like we can have empathy power, and we can create an entire week or 2 weeks worth of lessons and activities and thoughts and conversation and coaching. And I mean, this program really expands, because empathy is not something that is only relates to our relationships with others. It's not only relating to ourselves. It's also relating to, groups of people, people that are struggling, other countries that are at war, and folks that we don't know a lot about their culture. When we come from this place of empathy, our whole world expands. It expands into love, acceptance, compassion. And so to be able to describe it in a few minutes, and then it's going to be applied everywhere, that's unrealistic. We have to practice it, right? Because that's really the thing, is that practicing the sage perspective and practicing the sage powers. 6 weeks is just the beginning, right? I mean, let's see, it's been over a year now that I initially took the program myself and went through the program. And I am still learning how to apply these sage perspectives to all the things that come up, because these saboteurs, they're relentless. But they're because they've been around for so long, because they've developed when we were younger, when we were children. So, I'm 35 years old. So of course, I've had saboteurs for the last, 25 years. And so some of these saboteurs, it's not an overnight process, but I tell you what, it doesn't take much for making a shift into sage perspective, for your life to really change, and for your perspective of life, and for how you feel about life, and how you feel about yourself, and how you feel about others, for it to change drastically. Because if you think about it, the stress that we are under every single day, our judge is constantly there, judging ourselves, judging others, judging our situations, judging circumstances. And when we make a shift, even a slightest bit, even 20%, like, can you imagine your stress level being 20% less within 2 weeks, within 3 weeks? It's significant. And then you just keep building on that. The goal, of course, is that we're in sage more than we're in saboteur mode, and that we're in this place of love, empathy, explore all of this beautiful, wise old self within ourselves, that we're in that calm place more than we are in saboteur. And when we get to a place where it's like 70%, 75% of our day is in sage, I mean, life is beautiful. It's like sitting on a beach, just lovely, right? And we don't have to do a lot of things in order to do that. We just become aware that those saboteurs are there, that they're changing our thoughts, that they're eliciting feelings, that we're holding our hand on the hot stove and hanging on to these feelings that are disruptive, and they have no purpose. After a few moments of experiencing a feeling and an emotion, it has no purpose anymore. We've already learned the lesson from the emotion, that from the experience of what it was supposed to teach us. Our emotions are just these triggers of lessons, right? And so when we hold on to those emotions, then we are just causing ourselves undue stress and undue pain and emotional pain. And so when we find this sage place, then we're freeing ourselves from putting our hand on the hot stove and leaving it there and causing us more pain than is necessary. So empathy. Empathy it's an interesting experience that I had with my evolution of empathy. I'm a very empathic person, and I think most folks that I've met, talked to, and have helped with addictions, they are very, very empathetic. And it's the reason that they use sometimes, because being empathetic means that you feel other people's emotions, you feel other people's energy, you understand the pain that the world is going through and the pain that other people are going through in their lives. And when you're empathetic, you absorb that and feel it so much that it's hard to know what to do with it, because a lot of it's not even yours in the first place. When you're an empathic person, a lot of times other people's feelings and emotions, you take them on unknowingly. Like there's healthy boundaries that have to happen for empathic abilities to really have a good balance, and to be able to use them as a superpower without them getting so out of control that it's overwhelming, that it's depressing, that it's sad, that it's bothersome, right? And so most folks that I've talked to, they're just so empathetic. They feel the pain of others. They feel their own pain significantly, and they want to escape that, right? They want to escape the pain that's not even theirs. They can't solve it, right? You can't solve other people's pain. And a lot of times we get stuck with our own pain that we can't solve that either. We don't know how, or we're not sure if we can, or it's really hard, and so we want to avoid feeling it, right? And so the Sage empathy superpower is a healthy balance of empathy, and it's a place, especially where we're empathic with ourselves, and that we're compassionate for our own experience, and for forgiving ourselves for our mistakes in the past, for forgiving ourselves and letting go of guilt and shame about the things that we've done, about who we are. That difference between guilt and shame, guilt is, I feel bad for something I did. I feel bad for this particular behavior, this particular decision. Whereas shame is, I did this thing and I'm a terrible person because of it, right? Like shame moves into this level of personal attack, right? And shame is really heavy. Shame has a whole lot of weight to it, and it's one of the top 3 triggers that I talk about in my programs and my services. And so shame is this place of like pointing your finger at yourself, like, you suck, that was bad for you to do that, you are a bad person because of that. And when we're doing that in our head over and over and over every single day, that is heavy. I mean, there's just no other way to explain it that can really describe that experience of carrying around shame. And if you do it, then I know that you know what I mean. You're resonating with what I'm saying with that. That is just so heavy. It brings you down. It's depressing. It feels terrible, right? And we want to avoid that because it's so heavy. We want to avoid it. And so that's why shame is a trigger for use. And so when we're compassionate to ourselves, and we're forgiving for our mistakes, and we're forgiving for the things that we have done in the past that we're not very proud of, then we can start lifting that shame. When we start recognizing that, I can make mistakes, but I'm a human. I'm just literally designed to make mistakes, right? Life is about making mistakes and learning. And when you can release that shame, and you can release the chains of shame, and allow yourself to forgive yourself and find compassion for yourself, find compassion for, I'm human. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to survive the life. I'm trying to figure out how to thrive. Maybe thriving is not even in your thoughts right now. Thriving, like living on a beach, and abundant in money and life and support and love, and everything that you can think of, that's thriving. Maybe you're not even in a place where that can even seem possible, and you're just trying to survive. But compassion is really important to survival, Because if we're constantly putting ourselves down and shaming ourselves, well, then we're really going to struggle to get anywhere, right? Of healing, because that's a block for healing, which is why it's a saboteur. Okay, so empathy, loving ourselves, being compassionate with ourselves, and others, right? One of the saboteurs that that I feel like can really benefit from this empathy perspective is, and superpower, is the victim. When we have the victim saboteur, it makes us feel like we've been targeted, right? It makes us feel like people have hurt us, life has hurt us, we've had these experiences happen to us, we've lost all the people that we loved and cared about, and like there's this feeling of like, just the feelings are hurt, right? Feelings are hurt because life, because of these particular people, because these particular situations. And when you can find empathy, because other people, every time someone hurts your feelings, every time someone is mean, rude, and has this just negativity about them, that's their saboteurs, right? They're hijacked by their own saboteurs. Every single person has saboteurs. So when we are interacting with others, and when we think about the experiences that we've gone through, when we can find empathy for others, when we feel like they've done us wrong, when we feel like they've hurt us, we are really tapping into this forgiveness place of, you're human too, right? I mean, we can't expect that everyone is perfect. It doesn't mean that we let them hurt us again. It doesn't mean that we forgive and we open ourselves up to being treated the same way again. But when we can forgive people for the things that they've done that have hurt us, even if we didn't get an apology. I mean, that's one of the hardest things ever, right? Is to forgive someone for something that they didn't even apologize for. But when we can find that empathy, when we can be compassionate towards, they have their own saboteurs, they have their own traumas, they have their own experiences that have led them to making that choice that was hurtful to you, then we start letting go of all of this resentment, all of this anger, all of this sadness and depression that comes from feeling like a victim, right? When we feel like a victim, it's very depressing. It feels helpless. It feels like there's no options for relief because we're a victim, we're stuck, right? And so when we can forgive and we can start recognizing, like, actually, these things, people have gone through their own traumas. You know, a lot of times, like bullies, for example, bullies have been bullied, right? And so when we can find that compassion and say, you know, if somebody's bullying you in a moment, right? Or thinking about somebody that bullied you in the past, and you think about, you know, you're bullying me, or, you know, you're hurting my feelings. And you know what? It seems like you're hurting because I can imagine that you've been bullied before too. Like, even if you don't say that out loud, right? If you think about that and you say, man, you know, I'm empathizing with the fact that they've probably been bullied in the past, and that was really hurtful for them to go through. Because hurt people, right? People that are wounded tend to wound other people. And it's not a conscious choice. A lot of times people, you know, it's a choice to hurt people's feelings on purpose. But there's also a story behind that of, that's what they've known, right? They have to relearn things themselves, and them saboteurs are preventing them from relearning things. So when you can tap into empathy, that's why it's a sage power, because empathy brings you into this place of love, forgiveness, and compassion for yourself and others. And that's a really healing place. I strongly believe that love is what heals. And I often talk to family members about this, because a lot of times family are really struggling with, my family member is using, and they're stealing, and they're, you know, they don't treat me well, and, you know, all of the things that addiction causes in relationships, and problems that happen in relationships due to addiction. There's a lot of anger and resentment there. And it leads to shaming. It leads to making the person feel bad because they have addiction, making them feel bad for being them, for being imperfect, for being, it makes them that feel shameful. And that's not healing, right? I talked about this in a harm reduction video before. And so the empathy power allows you to separate that and say, you know what? You're still human. You still deserve love, and love is healing, because when someone feels loved, they want to heal. They want to be loved. They want to accept that love. Even though it might be hard at first, they do. And love is so healing. Just imagine if you've ever had an experience where you thought someone was going to be really angry with you because of a mistake that you made or something that happened, and you thought they were going to be super, super angry. And what they ended up doing was saying, you know what, that's okay. That's no big deal. And I really appreciate your help in this other way. Or, I love you anyway. Even though you made a mistake, I love you anyway. Imagine how great that felt, that you were still loved and supported and were talked to in a nice way and respected, even if you made a mistake, right? So imagine how good that feels. And then imagine how good that would feel to someone that struggles with addiction. And that empathy of, you're going through a tough place. There's been mistakes, there's choices that haven't been the greatest that have hurt my feelings, but I still love you and I still want the best for you and I want to support you, right? That's a whole different feeling from shaming them and making them feel bad for their mistakes, because punishments don't change behavior. Punishments create a whole lot of emotional problems and baggage and trauma. And so, there's a difference between discipline and punishment. There's a difference between consequences and punishment as well. And so that's for another video though. Okay, so the next superpower, explore. I want to just describe this really quick before I get into this, because I'm not sure if I mentioned it. Saboteurs all come from this place of fear, right? Sage powers come from a place of love. So empathy, of course, is love for yourself or love for someone else. And explore power is love for knowledge, love for exploration, love for discovery. Because the explore power is like being an explorer of a situation, of ourselves, and being an anthropologist. So an anthropologist, studies culture and human history and humans and human behavior in a way that is very objective. There is no interpretation to it at first, right? People go and explore, and the anthropologists uncover all of these cultural significant practices and understanding people and understanding evolution of people from a place that's non-judgmental, from a place of, this behavior. For example, some of the practices like sacrifice, right? Human sacrifice in cultures and practices in human history. Now we would say, well, that's ridiculous, right? And there's that judgment there. But at the time, like if we just understand, like, sacrifices were made because this was the belief, because this is what they thought would be a result of this sacrifice. And we come from this place of non-judgment. Like, we're not shaming this culture or these people for killing a human for a sacrifice, right? We're not judging that. We're saying this is just the facts. These are just how it was. And we just want to understand, right? It's a place of understanding why and what happened and details about it without the judgment. And that's what explore power is. And can you imagine how beautiful explore power is? Because it's like a love of learning, right? Like this love of finding something new, finding a new piece of information, finding out about new things in the world. And that's a beautiful place to be, because understanding helps us to connect with people and understand our situation, understand ourselves, understand life, right? Without this judgment putting a cloud over it, making meaning out of it, right? Like if we just understand a situation that we're going through, or we understand our mistake, even, if we make a mistake and we come from it from an explorer point of view, we're just exploring, we're discerning. We're not saying, I made this mistake, I'm such a bad human, I screwed up, I can't believe I did that, right? That's a bunch of judgment. We're coming from a place, I had this response, and I believe that it may have been influenced by this saboteur, by this belief that I thought that if I did that this outcome would happen. Or I thought that if I had that response, that it would help me in this way. And so you're discerning what kind of things about the situation, about your mistake, was part of the story and part of what happened, without the judgment of whether it was good or bad, right? Not putting it into this category of black and white, but just observing, like a scientist, just observing, right? And so of course that place is beautiful, because when we start looking at judgments, when we start bringing judgments in, we are actually blocking off our ability to see all of the information. Because when we have this negative thinking, right? When we have this bias for negative thinking, then we tend to see only things that are negative in order to reinforce our negative thinking. And it could be the same with positive thinking, which isn't a bad thing, right? Like if we're a positive person and we're looking for positive things in life, then we are going to see the beauty in everything, right? So just keeping that in mind, that this concept is not just a bad thing. It's not just, if someone has a bias towards seeing only one thing, that it's always bad, because it can work in your favor. And if you make that shift into positive thinking, into looking at the gifts and situations, then you can keep looking for the gifts and situations. It's like the snowball effect that just keeps happening, which is sage. That's sage perspective. That's the wise old owl, seeing the beauty in life and situations. So anyway, so exploring just the facts, exploring from an objective point of view, exploring from a scientific, anthropological point of view, to just discover what are all the different things about this situation, about that choice, about somebody else's choice, about the life that's happening, right? Innovate. So a lot of times, a lot of situations can go through all 5 of these superpowers in order. It's helpful to do them in order, because you want to start with empathy. You want empathy to be the first thing, so that you can tap into your heart space, so that you can have an open mind, so that you can break free from that negative thinking bias pattern. And so some things can go in order. Sometimes they don't, depending on the situation. One of the examples was, activate is the last one. And of course, if there's a fire in the house or a fire somewhere, you're not gonna like try to empathize first and go through all these steps and like sit down and do some journaling before you get your butt out of the building, right? So you just go straight into activate. And so it just depends on the situation, and it depends on what's happening, on what superpowers, sage superpowers, are going to be most beneficial. Innovate is this place of outside the box thinking and and problem solving, solutions focused. So, for example, if there was a response that you had, a reaction that you had, maybe your kid broke something or did something, and you got angry and you yelled at your kid, and you started using these superpowers, right? You started thinking about, how can I use these sage powers? So you empathize with your kid and with yourself, and you explore, like, what are all the things that led to this behavior? Maybe if your kid said something rude, or had a scream fit about something, then you would explore, like, maybe he's hungry, maybe he's tired, right? Maybe he had a rough day, maybe there's something bothering him that was just kind of stuck, and when he saw you, then he just like exploded. Maybe you've had a bad day and your kid can feel that energy, and it affected his energy, right? So that's explore on this place of just discovering. Innovate is this place of what are possible solutions? What are possible things that are options for responding to the situation, or to change the situation in the future, or to help resolve something, right? So innovate might be like thinking outside the box of, instead of punishment, right? This is one way that innovate is a sage power, can come into parenting. So instead of punishment, right? My kid yelled or had this scene, called you a name or swore or something, who knows what it was, and your initial response was to get pissed and yell back, right? Innovate sage power would come in and say, well, yelling isn't going to fix the situation or help it, right? It's going to make it worse. So what other options are there? And if the kid's hungry, get him some food, right? If he's tired, well, if he can take a nap, then that's great. If not, well, sometimes we just have to overlook that these things happen and just say, it hurt my feelings that you treated me that way. And, but I understand you're tired. And so hopefully you can sleep better tonight. Let's figure out if we can help you sleep better tonight, right? Which would be innovate. And so it's really about like, what are alternative responses and solutions to this problem? And sometimes it can be really thinking outside the box of completely radical from anything that's already out there, right? But it doesn't have to be. Innovate can just be what's different for you, right? Innovate could just mean that my typical response is to yell at my kid and ground him. And my innovative solution and option is that instead of yelling at my kid and getting mad at him because he had a rough moment, is I'm going to sit down with him. I'm going to give him a big old hug, and I'm going to see if he wants to play a game with me. And that's different, right? That's outside of your typical response. That's outside of your typical thoughts. And it's outside of a lot of what we learn growing up, right? Tough love is not that. And so when we are thinking outside the box, we are thinking outside of what we've already learned. We're thinking outside of, we're open to learning more information. We're open to other options and other solutions that are different and haven't been something that we've used before, or whatever the case may be. Sorry, my eye was itching. Okay. So innovate is this, what are all these creative options and creative solutions? And this is a really fun place when you can feel comfortable about being different, right? If you have a saboteur that says, nope, you have to be a certain way, the stickler is the one that says you have to be a certain way, you can't be different, you can't do things different, this isn't okay, then it's going to be really hard. So that's how all these sage superpowers, that's how they are so healing and replace the saboteur thinking, because sometimes they're opposite of what the saboteurs are, right? They're this place of thinking and feeling and experiencing life in ways that is just so different than the saboteurs that we are used to. And that is so freeing. It is such a freeing thing to experience that and feel it. So innovate is creativity and creative problem solving. Navigate is one of my favorites, and one that for me, I forget this one a lot. But it's so beautiful when you do it. So navigate is zooming out. If you've ever heard that before, of a lot of times when or the statement of seeing the forest through the trees. So when you're in the middle of the forest, all you can see are the trees around you, right? Like that's zoomed in. But if you imagine being outside of this forest and seeing the forest from above, you're navigating from a different perspective, right? Like you're seeing the situation from a higher perspective, from a more broad perspective. And so navigate is this wonder of what would my wise old self when I'm 70, 80 something years old, what would my wise old self say is important in this moment? Going back to the parenting example, I'm a parent. My son is 10, so parenting examples are like my everyday life. So that's why I use them a lot. So thinking about, the situation with the kid that just had a rough moment, and the reaction was to yell or have a reaction, right? Navigate is this question of, does this really matter in the end, right? Like the kid on February 24th, 2023, had a really rough moment and was upset and yelled and said a bad word or whatever it was. And the effect and impact of that, is that going to matter when he's 40? Is that going to matter when he's owning a business? Is that going to matter when he's talking to his partner or problem solving with his kids or his family? That moment of being upset is not going to matter in the long run, right? Now, some would say, well, of course, because if they're not taught to be respectful, then of course they're going to be something else in when they're adults. But that's not true. The response that we have to emotions, to our kids' emotions, if our child is struggling and has a whole bunch of emotion in a moment, our response to yell is going to make that situation worse. We're going to teach them that's how we respond to kids, is we yell at them. And then they're going to yell at their kids, make their kids feel bad, shame their kids. And that's how generational trauma happens. Because when we get stuck in those patterns that we learned from our parents, that didn't feel the greatest. It didn't feel great to get yelled at when we were kids, right? And when we repeat those patterns, that's generational trauma. And somebody along the line is going to break that, whether it's our generation, whether it's you and you break that for your children, or your children have to go through the process of breaking that for themselves and for their children. Eventually it's going to get broken along the way. But how many generations are going to go before kids stop getting their feelings hurt and stop getting yelled at, right? So anyway, navigate is this looking outside of the situation. If thinking about that situation, if when I'm 90 years old, did that moment where my kid got really upset and was yelling, is that important to my relationship with him when I'm 90? Is that important to that relationship? And what response would support what's important? That's really the navigate question, is what's important when I'm 90, right? Was it that I taught him not to be disrespectful in this one single moment? Is that what's actually important when I'm 90 years old? Or is having a loving relationship with my child and them feeling comfortable to express their emotions with me, and us being close and us having a close bond and being emotionally supportive to my child when I'm 90 and they're still needing mom, right? Well, wanting mom for support. Is that more important, right? And for me, that's more important. I would much rather have a healthy relationship with my adult child, that is able to come to me with their emotions and feelings and know that I'm there for them, that I'll listen, that I'll support them, that I'll be sounding board, that I'll give great advice or something. That's more important to me than him learning to be respectful in that one single moment, because kids don't purposely disrespect us. That's a saboteur belief. When we feel like kids are disrespecting us, it's always a saboteur belief. There is never a time where kids actually disrespect us without a reason that we just don't know, right? Like the disrespect part is a saboteur belief. And what's happening with that kiddo when they're being disrespectful is they're hurting. There's something that's hurting them. There's something that's bothering them. There's something behind that. And they don't know how to say it. They don't know how to talk about it. They don't know how to bring it up. They don't know how to share it. And so that moment of disrespect is there as a help me sign. And a lot of parents, grandparents that are raising kiddos, they don't connect with that. They don't understand that that's actually a sign of help me. Please help me. I need help, right? And so when we are able to be in a sage perspective and we're able to say, you know what? My kid just yelled and screamed and is really upset about something. And we can say, what's going on? We can empathize, right? We can ask. We can empathize with them. We can ask them and explore what's going on. What's behind this feeling upset? What's the feeling that's behind this, right? Exploring feelings. Then that sage perspective allows us to help our children heal from that moment. Whatever's bothering them, we help them heal. When we're stuck in saboteur mode and we're stuck in being reactive, we can't help our children heal. We can't. And so this is part of generational healing, is when we can find our sage perspective, we can find our heart, and we can share that with our kids. And it doesn't have to be younger children. It can be adult children, because parents are still important to adult kids. And if there's the same patterns of shaming and looking down on our kids because they make mistakes and because they're not perfect, that's still going to, because that's our saboteur response, right? Is to shame other people. And so when we can break that habit, even when our kids are older and they're adults, then we're helping heal generations. And I was just thinking about this earlier and I wanted to mention it. So I'm thankful to my higher self for bringing it up right now. But when we take on that healing responsibility, we're healing generations of the past too. Like when we break these generational cycles, our ancestors are just loving us for it, right? Like our ancestors are rooting for us and they're excited that we're changing some of these patterns that they just don't help our family anymore, right? They're not helping our kids be healthy adults and helping our kids be healthy kiddos. And so we have this cycle of addictions that keeps going. We have the cycle of abuse that keeps going, and trauma. And so when we take on this project of finding our sage self and finding our healing and finding our wellness so that it can trickle down, it trickles down to all of our generations. It trickles down and it doesn't even have to be, how do I put it? Like we can heal, we can find our sage self, we can heal these saboteurs, and it doesn't even have to directly result in a difference in our children, right? Like for example, with adult children, and we're not raising them anymore, but the energetic healing of generational trauma, the energetic healing, the spiritual healing, the healing of the soul, of our soul, helps every single generation forward. It helps everyone in the future. And so it's an energy because we're all connected, family, right? Where it's a family bond, an energetic bond that we have with other people. And when we heal our own energy and we can heal our own saboteurs and heal our own hearts and soul, then it spreads to everyone else that we know. It spreads across the world. I mean, could you imagine if everyone 50%, even 50%, if 50% of the world just stopped right now and said, you know what, I'm just going to heal all this crap. This is going to be my family's generation of healing all of this generational trauma. Could you imagine how the world would change almost overnight? Like there would be less fighting. There would be less people that are getting hurt. There would be less social media drama, right? Like there would be this huge shift. And it probably wouldn't even take 50%. I can imagine that 20 or 25% would be beautiful too. But just an example of how it doesn't have to be everything either. We don't have to heal everything for it to make a shift. Okay, so navigate, going back, refocusing. Navigate, asking what's really important when I'm 90, what is actually important in the long run, right? Is it more important that my kid stopped yelling at me in this moment, or is it more important that he felt safe to communicate his emotions and he felt supported in trying to figure out what emotions he was experiencing or she was experiencing, and that there's a beautiful relationship there that is healing. And the last one is activate. So, thinking about that innovate step or that sage power of innovate, what are all those solutions? What are all those outside the box thinking solutions and creative solutions to the problem or to the situation? Some don't require it, right? Some things you just find empathy, you explore, and that's it. And that's all you need in order to heal that, right? But activate is the place of action of this is what I'm going to do to change this, or this is what my response is going to be, or this is what I'm going to do, right? So, thinking about generational trauma, activate is the place of I'm going to get some help. Activate is this place of I'm going to shift. I'm going to show up for my kid different than my parents showed up for me. I'm going to start healing my trauma. I'm going to start looking at the things that are painful that I try to avoid. And I'm going to be brave and I'm going to be courageous to look at those things with help and support. Don't do trauma work by yourself. You don't have to do that. You can do some shadow work, right? But if there's some things that are pretty significant, then definitely get some support with that. So that is the activate, is the taking action. So those are the sage powers: empathy, explore, innovate, navigate, and activate. I would love to hear, if you make a comment, I would love to hear which one most resonates with you. Certain saboteurs seem to respond best to certain sage powers, like the stickler, for example. If we're empathetic with ourselves, then the stickler seems to lose its power quite a bit. But really, I want to know what one resonated with you most, and I want to hear any questions or insights that you got from this video. Two, I want to mention that I do have an event coming up March 17th, 2023, and it's going to be great. I'm going to go through 3 solutions, holistic solutions for addiction healing. So I will be teaching 3 ways for folks to use holistic healing for addictions and learning how to heal addictions. That can be added to any program, medication, or anything that somebody's already doing, or it can just be the first step. If you don't have help, if you don't have medications, or you're not doing anything else for your addiction, then this is a great place to start too. It's really flexible. It's really open. It's complementary to anything else. So I hope that you can connect with me on March 17th. It is free. And there is a link for signing up for that and registering for that. So there will be some prizes that I will be giving out to folks that attend that as well, including some stones, some healing tools, and some books. I have some books and workbooks that I developed, and I'm excited to share with folks. So I look forward to next steps. Please subscribe to my channel or like my Facebook page so that you can get updates. I plan to do these little these little workshops, these little education videos once every week on Friday. So thank you for joining me. I really appreciate that you were here with me and that you were listening. And I hope that that you got a golden nugget out, is what it's called, a golden nugget out of what we talked about today. And I'd love to hear what you got out of it. I'm here to support you. Holistic recovery services. We have a lot of different supports and services for people with addictions and family members and the community and even agencies. So check it out and reach out if you have any questions or are wanting to receive any of the services that we offer. All right. Love and light to you.